So glad you're here tonight using with us on this Thursday night. This is the Friends May meeting. My name is Stacy Macris. I'm one of the co-presidents of the Friends group this school year, along with Carrie Chappie, who is also on this call and is going to introduce our speaker tonight in a moment. If you are unfamiliar with Friends, we are a parent-run independent organization with the goal of maximizing the education of all of our Birmingham Public School students. We work closely with Birmingham Public Schools administration and staff and teachers, and we have many of them on this call with us tonight. We put on a content-specific monthly meeting, so this is our topic for tonight. The school year, of course, is almost over, so we only have one more meeting for the school year, which is on June 3rd, and that's our planning meeting for next school year. So if you have any ideas or topics that you would like to see us bring, or perhaps you might know someone that you think would be a great presenter, we'd love to have you either attend our June 3rd meeting with that idea, or if you can't do that, if you could send Carrie or myself an email, that would be wonderful. We're always looking for great topics to bring you, and I'll put both of our emails in the chat. You can find more information about Friends at www.friendsofdifferentlearners.com. There's a membership form on that website if you would like to join us. We would love to have you. But these meetings that we put on every month are free. That's my laundry chute in the background if you just saw some laundry drops. Sorry about that. These meetings that we put on every month are free and available to the entire community. So we are happy that you guys are here tonight. Also, we are trialing Venmo now. So I'm going to put that information in the chat as well. But as part of our membership, we request a $10 donation, which we put to good use. And I'm going to put our Venmo, our brand new Venmo in the chat if you would like to pay that way. I know that's a lot easier for many of us. We are looking for building reps for next school year. We try to have a Friends rep at every building within Birmingham Public Schools. I know my laundry is just going to keep falling behind me. This is that virtual meeting where, sorry about that, guys. So we try to have a building rep at every building within Birmingham Public Schools. This is a very low time commitment position, but a great way to get involved with Friends and a very important position. You don't have to come to any of our Friends meetings to be a building rep for the school, but we would love to have you. It's more of like a liaison position between the school and back to the Friends group. So if parents have questions, you can connect them back to us. And I just wanted to give the reminder that this meeting is being recorded. We have typically found in this virtual format that leaving till the end for questions to answers is easiest, but unless our speaker prefers otherwise. And you can also put questions in the chat function if you'd like, and Carrie and I can facilitate those at the end as well. So with that, I want to pass it over to Carrie to introduce our speaker tonight.
Thank you, Stacy. My name is Carrie Chappie. I am one of the co-presidents of Friends of Different Learners this year with Stacy. And I would like to present, actually, I'm very honored to present Stephanie Smith, or Stephanie Cork Smith, who I actually refer to as the mother of dragons. I don't know if you knew that, Stephanie. You are the trainer of trainers. She's truly an amazing individual and speaker, a valuable resource on the topic of literacy and reliable tools for supporting the optimum results for all children. Stephanie is certified to train educators in structured literacy based programs accredited by the IDA, the International Dyslexia Association, and the International Multisensory Structured Language Education Council. She has contributed to the development of many professional development workshops and educational materials available through Brainspring. Stephanie has presented on dyslexia and reading instruction in many states and national level conferences. Thank you, Stephanie, for being here tonight and sharing your knowledge with our community.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm happy to be here. I've been to a few of your friends' meetings and I'm very honored to be asked back. It's funny, when Carrie asked me if I would do this, I sent her my little blurb for what I was going to talk about. And then she said, do you have a bio? And I said, sure. And I looked at it and I'm like, oh, I haven't done, I haven't really done a presentation, to be honest. So I teach all the time. But it's been a while because I was the only one in our company doing presentations for a long time, and they decided they wanted to get more people involved. And then when COVID hit, so I sent Carrie my bio and I made sure it was up to date. And when I saw the flyer went out, my husband and I, he's the director of tutoring at Brainspring, we looked at it and I went, I forgot to change my name. I got married 2 years ago. So I do just go by Stephanie Smith now. For a while, I put Cork in the middle just because I thought nobody's going to know who I am, but nobody knows who I am anyway. So it doesn't matter if I'm Stephanie Cork or Smith. But so anyway, I am really thrilled to be here. And I think we have some good information for you that I want to share. I'm going to focus on really 4 main questions in my presentation. What are the red flags of, when do you really, should you get concerned about a reading problem? How do you know when to step in? How to support your child at home? And what is the best help for a struggling reader? So what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to really answer those questions at 3 different levels. The preschool, kindergarten level, the elementary level, and a little bit of middle school and high school level. We're mainly going to focus on the elementary level, obviously, for this group. But I do want to talk about, some of you have younger children at home, some of you have older children at home, and I want to include them too. So we're not really here to talk about dyslexia tonight. So it seems funny that I'm starting off with that. But what I'm going to be doing is giving you some signs of reading difficulties. And I want you to really know, if you look at those signs and you only see 1 or 2, you shouldn't really be overly concerned. So I want you to know what is the difference between a child who just struggles and one who has a severe reading difficulty. So over the years, many parents, teachers have asked me, it used to be people would say, well, my child doesn't read backwards, so I don't think they're dyslexic. And that isn't, I've never met a child that reads backwards, and I've been doing this for about 20 years. I'm not saying there isn't a child out there who wouldn't do that, but that's not what we would call a sign of dyslexia. So if you look up on the screen, students with what people often ask, well, what do they do? What is it that you're trying to fix? And I'll tell them, well, they have trouble learning the letter sound relationship. They have trouble with reversals. They have trouble rhyming. They have trouble with letter formation, object naming, and word retrieval. So for example, there are often students that'll say hand me the thingy. And you're like, the thingy, can you describe the thingy? What color is the thingy? Or they might confuse words like tornado and volcano. Even though they know the difference, those words sound a lot alike. They have trouble decoding multi-syllable words, and they have trouble with spelling. The thing is, students without dyslexia do the same thing. Many of them do the same thing. So what is the real difference is dyslexia is diagnosed based on frequency and severity. So let me put this more in what I'll call Brady Bunch terms. You might have Jan, who struggles with letter sound relationships and reversals. You might have Cindy, who struggles with sight words and rhyming. And you might have Bobby, who struggles with letter formation and object naming. But then you have Marcia, who struggles with all of those and more often and more frequently and more severely. Marcia would be the one labeled with dyslexia. I used to try to randomly think of students' names and I could never think of students' names. So now I just go with the Brady Bunch characters for that. But that's the difference. It's based on frequency and severity. So they're not really doing anything different than other students. So to me, if I have a student who is not dyslexic, they are just less severe. I have less of these things I have to work on with them. So what this is that I'm going to put up on the screen is called the Decoding and Coding Continuum. And it's adapted from Marcia Henry, who is a reading guru. And originally I used to use this to explain how we really need to slow down reading a little bit. You know, as a country, we seem to be on this race. The faster we get kids to read, the better. The younger they are, the better. And yes, young children are sponges. I agree with that. But by pushing reading fast across our country, we're causing reading problems. So I'm not at all saying any particular district or Michigan or anything, but as a country, we've been trying to get kids to read faster, earlier, and younger. And while they can handle many of the skills, I'm finding what the problem is there are these underlying skills that have to be taught that will prevent reading problems. And if they're not thoroughly taught, kids will go on to struggle. So if we skip over those, if we gloss through them, then we're going to end up causing reading problems. So we are going to focus quite a bit on the preschool kindergarten level, not because I think most of you have children that are struggling at that age, but because it's the skills that are taught at that level that often are the skills that are causing the problem. So let me kind of show you what this is, kind of shows you the continuum of different skills that might be taught from kindergarten all the way through to high school. You know, we do have between kindergarten all the way to 12th grade, 13 years to teach reading. And it shouldn't just be the focus of first, you know, kindergarten first in the second grade. We have to think of it as a lifelong, or I should say a school age process. So in kindergarten, the skills that I really want to focus on are those first ones, the phonemic awareness skills. And I'll talk about why they are important and why they cause reading problems if students struggle with them. So this just kind of shows, you know, everything from alphabet to sounds, consonants, and vowels. We get into, as they progress, into multi-syllable words, different syllable patterns, affixes like prefixes and suffixes. And when they get into middle school and high school, 65% of their reading is morpheme based, which is Greek and Latin morphemes. So one thing about our language is we have all these different influences in the English language. We have Anglo-Saxon patterns, we have Greek patterns, we have Latin patterns, and we're kind of a melting pot of those. So what the Anglo-Saxon patterns of our language are our everyday speaking language and reading to about a 5th grade level. So when you hear like phonics rules, they're really referring to the Anglo-Saxon rules of our language. And so we have to teach them if we want kids to get to a 5th grade level. But if we want them to progress beyond that, we also have to teach Greek and Latin morphemes as well. So at the end, I'll talk a little bit about that as well, but I'm going to focus, like I said, mostly on the elementary level. So these are some of the warning signs for very young children. Remember what I showed you earlier. 1 or 2, even 3 of them mildly are not a big concern. It's normal. But when you have a lot of these and it's more severe, then it may be a sign for, you know, you may want to consider some kind of testing. And we can talk, and I can answer questions about testing if you do have questions about that as well. So things like delayed speech, mixing up sounds, a huge sign of actually dyslexia, and I don't want to scare anybody because if your children are doing this, like I said, there has to be other things with it. But instead of like kids reverse B's and D's up to 3rd grade, that's common. But saying things beyond like preschool age, saying like aminal for animal, or sketty for spaghetti. Not those are more often signs, confusing sounds in the language. So speech is very related to reading. So if you notice up here, they talk a lot about sounds. So the second bullet, difficulty separating sounds and blending sounds in words and rhyming. Those are the phonological awareness skills that I'm going to talk about in a minute. So they're really important. We have trouble memorizing parents' names, address, phone number, the alphabet. If they have chronic ear infections, again, because reading is related to speech, and if they're not hearing the sounds properly through infections, that can cause some difficulty. Often confusing right and left, not knowing which their dominant hand is. Again, a few of these is not a big sign, but together they are a bigger sign of a reading problem. Delay in fine motor skills, trouble tying shoes, holding a pencil, using scissors and glue. The last one, I mean, most of us, I have a child who's easily upset, cries and whines often, and she's 22. So, not always a sign of dyslexia, but again, adding that to it, those together are signs. So a minute ago, I talked about these phonological awareness skills. So there's two, I'm going to move the slide because we're going to talk about that right now. So phonological awareness, a phoneme means sound. Okay. And I'm not a speech and language pathologist. I am a dyslexia specialist, but I'm not a speech and language pathologist. So I never really understood the difference between auditory processing and phonological processing. And once somebody explained it very easily for me, now it makes great sense, and it makes the understanding of phonological awareness a lot easier to understand. So auditory processing is processing all sounds. Like right now, I can hear cars go by the street, and there might be a hum on the computer, and it's all sounds. Birds chirping, dogs barking, people talking, cars running. What phonological skills are speech sounds. So they're a subcategory. They're just tied to speech sounds. So what phonological awareness is an awareness of sounds of our language. If you ever hear sounds of other language like German, they make sounds we don't even make. Like in our language, the sound zh is not used very often, like leisure, okay? So what phonemic awareness is an awareness of the sounds of language. So if you look at this chart very briefly, when you're first teaching, if you're starting with very young children, the very first skills you would work on is word awareness. What is a word? And I know that sounds funny, but when my daughter was 3, she jumped up on our like swing set out back, and she started swinging back and forth, and she goes, "Mom, look," and she goes, "Scaring me." And I went, just, is that what she thinks that's called? I mean, I guess every time she does it, I go, "Brianna, you're scaring me." But does that sound like a word to her, like sparingly? I'm going to jump up on the swing set and do 5 scaring me's, and then I'm going to jump down and do 3 somersaults. She thought scaring me was what I called what she was doing. She didn't realize I was saying, "You are scaring me." She thought she was doing a scaring me. So word awareness is being able to, like, one of the activities is to be able to separate each word within, like isolate each word in a sentence, or essentially what you're saying is count words in a sentence. But sometimes when they're that little, they don't know how to count. So we usually have them push a manipulative. From there, we go up to syllables, and syllables would be like blending syllables. This is all oral, by the way. There's no letters, there's no words. There might be pictures, but no letters. So it might be like saying, "Guess my word, cupcake," and they guess cupcake, or paper, and they guess paper. That's blending syllables together. Segmenting that back apart would be saying, the teacher says paper and they go paper and they segment it apart, okay? So from there we go on to onset and rhyme. Onset and rhyme is like the beginning sound followed by the vowel to the end of the word. So like in cat, the onset would be k, and the rhyme part of the word would be the at part. So we would blend those together. And then we finally get to the isolated sound at the phoneme level, that fourth category in. That means we're down to we're not using chunks of sounds like syllables. We're isolating the individual sound. So the reason I want to talk about the importance of this is because in a minute, I'm going to show you, this is the root. As a matter of fact, I'll show you the definition of dyslexia. It is rooted in the phonological system. So if we don't spend a lot of time on these skills early on, it will cause reading problems down the road. And I want you to look really the most current science. These are the ages typical of achieving and low achieving students. And what I want you, we've always pushed this to, well, actually, it was pushed to kindergarten, and then it's been pushed to preschool. The problem is sometimes, you know, there's a part of the brain that is not formed until age 5 that really helps with reading, okay? It's called myelin. It's a fatty tissue that makes neural pathways go faster for reading, and it's formed at age 5. So of course we can introduce these skills to students earlier, but it doesn't mean they're ready for them. So if the kindergarten teacher has already moved on, and I'm talking nationally, I'm not talking in your district, because I feel like there's the push to do faster, faster, faster. And truthfully, a lot of that push comes from the parents. They want their kids reading faster. So the districts feel like they have to speed it up. But in doing that, we are causing reading problems in our country because we really need to focus on these skills. And like I said, they should be in our curriculum through to 3rd grade. If you look at phony manipulation, it says typical achieving students don't master this till late 1st grade to 3rd grade. And some students may never master that higher level. It doesn't mean they won't go on to read, but without these skills, reading is more laborious. Okay, it's harder, it's more difficult, it takes longer, and they don't want to do it because who wants to do something laborious all the time? So, you know, you can't blame them. So these are signs of weakness in phonological awareness skills, often that you see later on: poor spelling, inaccurate decoding of new words, mispronunciation of words, and difficult remembering words. Like I said, I actually have the same slide in a presentation for dyslexia, and the title says Signs of Dyslexia. So these are the root cause. These phonological awareness skills are the root cause. Here is the definition of dyslexia from the International Dyslexia Association. And notice that it says quite clearly, these difficulties typically result from a deficit in the phonological component of language. So these are very important skills. So right now I want to talk about how you take it from those skills to achieving what we call permanent word storage, okay? So many of you have heard of sight words, right? You know, we're all trying to get our kids to learn sight words. A sight word really is a word that is permanently stored in your brain. So when you see the letter C-A-T, you don't have to look at it and go C-A-T-T-A-T, cat. Can you imagine if you had to do that for every word? So what we want is words to become sight words. We want them to be permanently stored so they can be instantly accessed. So what is the connection between that and phonemic awareness? Well, this is rather new information. We didn't always know where words were stored. For a long time, The reading community thought words were stored visually. We look at a word and then we access that word up in our visual system of the brain based on how we look at it. Because when we are looking at letters, they come through our eyes. But that's not where words are stored. They're stored in the auditory system, because what we have to remember, the written form of the English language is based on our speech. So before we learn to read, we listen and we speak. So the word cat was never visually stored in our brain. It was stored auditorily in our brain. Okay, so that's where we're accessing words, and that's why proper pronunciation and all of those sound games are so critical. Now, this is something that I never, it's funny that I never really thought about this, because I've had kids that, let's say, have you ever had students or had children or seen students that spell the word like scent, snet? Okay, it's wrong order. Words are based, the symbols, on the alignment of what we pronounce the word. Okay, so in other words, each symbol sound is in the order in which we pronounce a word. So snet and scent don't have the same meaning. and if a student, that's a huge sign of kind of an auditory processing difficulty, that's why they can't quite access that. If they don't have those strong phonemic awareness skills, they don't really recognize that connection. Where students, some kids have strong phonemic awareness skills. They have strong oral list. Well, it's not really oral listening, it's processing. What we have to realize is some students don't have that. So what is the process that takes a word to permanent word storage or becoming a sight word? And that process is called orthographic mapping. And that's kind of a newer word in the reading community in the last couple years, being used much more widely. And it's like I said, so I found this very interesting. The average student only needs to see a word 3 to 5 times before it's stored instantly in their brain. Yet a student with a learning disability may have to see that or practice those skills 50 to 100 times before they achieve permanent word storage. So there's a big discrepancy between students. If you think, I always thought it was kind of, I don't mean sad, but I wish dyslexia was like on a continuum, kind of like the autistic spectrum, because there really is a continuum there. And if you think of a child who just needs to see a word 3 times and they have it instantly stored, versus another child who needs to see it 100 times before it's instantly stored, that's a big difference. And for the teacher, so they are going to need some help at home, and that's some of the information I want to share with you tonight. So what is orthographic mapping? What's taking it from being able to decode a word and sound it out to instant recognition of it? And what orthographic mapping is, taking a word, pulling it apart into its sounds, and putting it back together over and over again. So like taking a word like cat, at, and bringing it back together, cat, at, and bringing it back together, cat. So in our tutoring, or what we train teachers to work with, for example, when kids are doing spelling, I'm trying to look for something that'll look like, pretend my phone is my desk, okay? And when I give them a spelling word and I give them a word, I'm going to do a very simple word like hot. They go hot, they finger tap hot. So they just pulled the word apart, they spell the word, and when we're done, after they've done that with all the words, they put them back together. And we would practice that quite with, like if we're working on a particular pattern, the more we pull it apart and put it back together and pull it apart and put it back together, the more that the sooner that word will be permanently stored. Okay, so a traditional way a lot of schools still are continuing to teach sight words are through memorization lists. And we're starting to, I'm not saying they're bad. Usually those are a list of words. Words by themselves are not sight words. You know, sometimes I'll have someone ask me like, is the word there word? And I want to say, well, can you recognize it instantly? And if they say yes, then I'll say it's a sight word to you. But if it's somebody else doesn't recognize it instantly, it's not a sight word yet. So what sight word lists are a list of common words that we are hoping to become permanently stored in our brain. So I'm going to share with you some techniques in a little bit that will help pull them apart, bring them back together, pull them apart, bring them back together to achieve that permanent word storage. Okay, so just to kind of emphasize this point a little bit more, this is how we access words in our brain for listening, the top one. First, we hear a sequence of sounds like cat, and it may come fast, cat. The sound sequence is recognized, that sequence, and matched to a word that's already stored in our brain. Then oral vocabulary is activated and meaning is retrieved. So again, we used to think we looked at a set of letters, the visual properties were stored in the visual system, but that's not what's happening. So what we do when we read is we translate a familiar string of these letters, graphemes, into a sequence of sounds like at. That sequence is recognized and matched with a word that is stored in our brain. Oral vocabulary is activated and meaning is retrieved. So at first, decoding is slow and laborious, but like I said, after you've seen a word several times, depending on the student, 50, anywhere from 3 to 100, that will be permanently stored so that they just look at CAT and they don't have to sound it out anymore. Okay. So I'm going to give you a little simulation of how to show you words are stored auditorily. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put up a phone number and I want you to memorize the phone number. It's only going to stay up for a few seconds, like 10 seconds. And you can't do anything. Don't cheat. You can't write it down until it disappears. Then I don't care what you do to remember the number. But what I'd like a few of you to do is share with me your strategy. Okay, you guys ready? Here's the number. All right. Now do what you have to do to remember it. All right. Can I have a volunteer? Somebody want to tell me what their strategy was to remember the number? Because if not, I'll call on you.
Go ahead, Catherine.
I you know 1-800, and then I break it
so
down.
So that had meaning for you.
Right.
What did 1-800 mean for you?
I'm gonna forget the number if I talk too much, but
you can write it down now if you remember.
Okay, just 680-70-94, and I broke it down by 1-800 is just something you hear on the TV all the time. You use it all the time. It's just it's the toll-free number. You just know that. Mm-hmm. Then I break it down to chunks, 6, and then like a locker combination, 80-70-94.
Okay, so let me ask you what though. There's usually 2 ways people remember it. One is they will kind of say it over and over in their head to remember it and then usually write it down. Or did anyone look at the shape of the symbols and visually remember those shapes and write those down based on the shapes? So how many of you, give me a thumbs up if you said the numbers over and over and over as your strategy? Okay. Here, let me scroll through because I can't see all of you. Let me see you hold your thumbs up if that's what you did. Okay. Did anyone do it the other way? And I can't see all of you, so let me know if anyone did. You can unmute yourself, but it'd be very rare. I'm not saying that you didn't or that nobody does it based on the visual properties, but it would be rare. I would say if you have that great of visual property skills, you should probably market those in some way and make a lot of money, because most of us will say the number over and over and over until we either remember it or can write it down. So the point there is we are not, we even though we're looking at it, that's not where we're storing that information. We may not have been saying those numbers out loud, but if you said 680, those are words and they're stored in your brain versus this shape. Okay. So that's what I was getting at with how important these skills are. So right now we're going to also have a little bit of fun. I want to talk about phony manipulation, and I'll have you do some. So if you could all unmute yourself, let me give you an example of what phony manipulation is. This is a skill that says is like ending first grade, going up to third grade. And I think you'll see why it's not a preschool level skill. So start actually at different levels of manipulation, starting with syllables and then going to sounds. Say birthday.
Birthday.
Okay, now say birthday, but don't say birth.
Day.
Day.
The answer is day. Okay, say lifeguard.
Lifeguard.
Now say lifeguard, but don't say guard.
Life.
Okay. Now I want you to do it without looking at the screen, because if you're looking at the screen and you take away life and that left with guard, that means you used your orthographic processing system, which is your spelling system, and not your sound system. Okay, so don't look at the screen, but see if you can still do it. Say nearly.
Nearly.
Now say nearly, but don't say near.
Lee.
Good. Say sportsmanship.
Sportsmanship.
Now say sportsmanship, but don't say sports.
Manship.
Okay, now we're going to go to the sound level. This is going to get a little harder. Say fur.
Fur.
Now say fur, but instead of say w.
Fur.
I mean, still not too hard, but you could see why maybe a first, second, or third grader would struggle with this. I have done this with an 11th grader who is an on-level 11th grader, and she struggled, and she loved doing these. So it's not too babyish either. Say fright.
Right.
Now say fright, but don't say
Right.
I'm going to do a couple more. Say seize.
Seize.
Now say seize, but don't say z.
See.
See. Say pavement.
Pavement.
Say pavement, but don't say v.
Pavement.
Payment. See, they're getting a little harder. Say artful.
Artful.
Now say artful, but don't, instead of t, say
Armful.
armful. All right. Say candy.
Candy.
Now say candy backwards.
Wide. Enac.
Good, Enoch. Good. All right. One more. Say bagpipe.
Bagpipe.
Now say bagpipe backwards. Okay, so I gotta stop you guys here. Okay, it's pipe gab. But here, two things people often do. They say pip, pipe backwards is pipe, okay? Or they say an E sound first because the E at the end of bagpipe, but you hear the E. And that's again a sign of using your spelling or your orthographic processor and not your phonological processor. So what can parents do to help with these skills? Because they are, even though I'm still talking, young children, they are the cause of a lot of reading problems. So what I would say early on to prevent it, first and foremost, I work with struggling students and teachers, but therefore I also work with parents and the parents often want to help, but they don't know how to help. And one of the things I tell them, and I think they just think I'm like patting them on the back, but make reading a warm and loving experience, because that will make them want to do it. If you want to give them the desire to read, it has to be a warm and fun experience for them. And that's not something, you know, teachers maybe can do a little better job. I only see students when I do see them an hour a week. I don't really have time to make it a warm, loving experience and introduce them to these rich literature and read to them. So that's the best thing a parent can do. And early on, reading a lot. I know we are always told to read nursery rhymes, but it's because of those sound, that language that is so important. Nursery rhymes, rhyming books, Dr. Seuss, those are excellent, excellent things to read to students. Talk about sounds in a word. You know, when my daughter was little, and this is a good example of phonemic awareness issues, we were playing I Spy, and I said, let's find words that start with the t, t, t sound. And I looked at her and I go, Brianna, there's a t, t, tree. And my daughter looked at me and said, no, Mom, it's a ch, ch, tree. And I'm like, ooh, either I'm not pronouncing it very well. How would you spell tree? C-H-R-E-E. That's a sign. That's how spelling shows you it's a sign of phonological difficulty. So playing games like rhyming picture cards or I Spy with sounds, those are going to be really, really important. Enunciating, slowing your speech down. You know, one time I had I'm not saying this is going to fix all speech problems, but I had a student who was 4 and he couldn't make the sound. And he wasn't quite doing it right. And I said, Topher, well, when you make the sound, you put your teeth on your lower lips, like not to bite them, but, and he went, and he was like, oh, and I was like, boy, maybe I should be a speech and language pathologist. I'm just kidding. If only speech problems could be fixed that easily. Also, here's something that I would say teachers, and definitely me as like when I'm tutoring students, don't have time as much to work on letter formation. Letter formation takes a lot of time and practice. And if I'm seeing a student once or twice a week for 50 minutes, it's not going to be a big component. And it's something that probably needs to be done until it's corrected daily. So what we use is called house paper. And there's a lot of different tools, but this will show you where the letter lives on the page to keep so proper handwriting should be uniform in size, shape, and slant, and placed properly on the line. So we have different versions of this house paper, and but I've even just drawn, you know, taken regular like kindergarten paper and drawn a house on it for my students when I didn't have access to this. So I wanted to show you those are the things you could do early on. So now, you know, I don't want to keep you too long, and I've realized I've spent a lot of time on those underlying skills, but they're very important. Let's move on to the elementary age, okay? And these are some of the signs. Handwriting that is difficult to read, some reversals past first grade, poor spelling, inaccurate, laborious reading, not remembering sight words, difficulty recalling math facts, difficult pronouncing or recalling words, or the word order issues, messy bedroom, backpack, and desk. Again, by itself, that is not a sign of a problem, but added to it, trouble starting or completing class, you know, schoolwork, and often dreads or complaints going to school, headaches, things like that. So reading really is a complex task. You know, we have all of these things that come into it. So it's not something, you know, even without some of my dyslexia training, you know, I wouldn't have been able to teach my daughter to read as a parent. There's a lot that goes into it. But it does, if we can make it a little more simplified, another important aspect is that a reading fluency difficulty or a comprehension difficulty. And most of the parents that call us for help say it's a comprehension difficulty, but it's really a reading fluency affecting comprehension. So reading fluency is rate and accuracy. I mean, simplified. It's also inflection and tone, and but accuracy is a big part of this. So to give you an example of how it can affect fluency affects comprehension, I have a second grade passage as an assessment that I give a lot of students to read. And one of the lines in it is, "The mouse ran into a hole by the tree." Over the years, I've had many students read it, "The moose ran into a hole by the tree." So not accurate. And then at the end of the story, there's a question: why did the mouse run into the hole? So when I asked that and the student read it moose, they look at me like, "Lady, did you not hear me read? There's no moose in this, or there's no mouse in this story." And I'm like, "Sorry, I just have to ask the questions." I feel stupid. But that is accuracy, and that is fluency. The student didn't read the word correctly, and it affected the comprehension. So this is a really beautiful, simple way of looking at reading called the simple view of reading. Decoding times language comprehension. So understanding language, oral language, being able to decode words times oral language comprehension equals reading comprehension. You have to be able to do both. So let me give you an example. If you can't decode anything, if you can't understand any of the symbols on the page, even if you understand all of the information in it, you're going to have zero reading comprehension. If you can't read it, you won't you may be, what I mean is you may be capable of understanding the information, but if you can't, like if I gave you if you don't speak German and I gave you something in German, you might understand the concepts if I explained it in English, but you can't read it. So you would have zero reading comprehension. If the opposite of that is you could decode everything, but didn't understand a word you were reading, that would also result in zero reading comprehension. And that's like, to give you an example of that, I learned Spanish in high school. I had 4 years. I remember how to pronounce words, the phonetic structure of Spanish, but I don't remember what any of the words mean. So if you gave me a passage, I might be able to pull off like I can read it in Spanish, but I don't know what I'm reading. So I have zero reading comprehension. All right, so to give you an example of how important even like being able to decode or to read fluently is, here is a passage I'm going to put up that I only have 10% of the words blocked out. That means 90% of the words you can all read. So let's see how well, when somebody has a 90% reading fluency rate, we think that sounds really good. But if I were to say to you, you can successfully cross the street 90% of the time, you're like, wait, that's not so good. So let's look at what a 90% fluency rate is on like a middle school, high school passage. Worldwide, many strains of are already too off, except emergent forms of lacking two signifies that untreatable by every known are on their way. What the heck am I talking about? I have no idea. And yet 90% of the words are there in that passage. Only 10% were taken out. But I have no idea what this is about with just 10% of the words taken out. And as they get older, it's words like Mesopotamia and photosynthesis that they can't read, which are the important content words that they need to be able to read. Okay. So let's go back to this again and show if you can only decode 50% of the words, but you understand 90% of what they mean, you're still only going to have 45% reading comprehension. And if you can decode 100% of the words, but you only understand a little less than half of them, again, you're only going to end up with 45% reading comprehension. So, time-wise, how am I doing, ladies, with time? What time? I think, do I have about 10 more minutes? Okay.
Yeah, I believe you should have about 10 more minutes.
Okay.
7:52 right now.
Okay. So this is a progression. The goal is for students to be able to read connected text, right? But before they can do that, we have to remember they have to be able to break down usually a multi-syllable word. Before they can break down a multi-syllable word, they have to be able to read a syllable. So one of the things that we have students do is practice reading syllables in isolation, and that helps them to be able to read longer words, or we teach them a process for breaking down multi-syllable words into syllables. So even though none of these are actual words up there, except for the bottom two, extirpate and Constantinople, in order to read multi-syllable words, you would have to be able to read syllables like this: ter, pate, pert, thig, dite, blorn. Students should be able to apply the phonetic rules to unfamiliar words, because if they can't read syllables like this, how in the world are they going to read words like extirpate, Constantinople, Mesopotamia, photosynthesis? It's really important that they can read fluently at the syllable level. And before you can read fluently at the syllable level, you need to be fluent with the sounds, the letters and the sounds. So what can the parent do to help? Again, especially when they become resistant to reading, read to them. My daughter was not a struggling reader, but she was kind of resistant, very ADHD. She would read a half a book, get bored, and then not want to finish it. So I was really worried that she wasn't getting all the vocabulary and reading practice she needed in middle school. So I said, go pick out a book. And I ended up reading the majority of that book to her. But then she went on to read the 2 sequels and the prequel on her own. So, sometimes they just need a start. She'd often say, I'm too tired, do you read? And I'd be fine, I will. And that's really important. Read grade level material. So if you have a child that's struggling and they're in 4th grade and they're reading at a 2nd grade level, read 4th grade material to them to give them the vocabulary and those experiences that they need at the 4th grade level. Continue to practice letter formation. For writing skills, the less laborious their writing is, the easier it will be. They'll be able to get their thoughts across. And then short vowels, if you were to ask me what is the #1 difficulty our students have, kindergarten all the way to adult, I don't know why it's short vowels, but I do know why, because listen, a and sound a lot alike. And sound a lot alike. The long vowels don't sound as close together, A and E, but sound a lot alike. So we find it's not just our elementary students, it's our middle school and high schoolers that confuse those short vowels. And the short vowel pattern is the most common pattern in the English language. So if they don't have those 5 short vowels mastered, it's very problematic. So I want to show you this real quick. Notice what this student is doing here. I know there's a lot on the page and I'm trying to kind of hurry through this, but I gave her the word rug, and she spelled it rag. Over a little further, the word was vet, she spelled it vat. Now, the next row is nonsense words, which are like syllables. So the word I gave her was tag, she spelled it tag. Another one was mub, she spelled it mab. And another one was shug, she spelled it shag. What I want you to notice is A for you, A for E, A for E, A for you, A for you. Do you see a pattern there? That's what we see all the time, is that short vowel confusion. So what can a parent do? We have, let's say she had A and O for one, or she had A and E for one, okay? So you could give them just, on an index card, an A and an E. And you say a word like, first you might just start with the sound, ah. And they show you, whoops, sorry, not that one, ah. They show you that one. I did this earlier today with teachers with O-A-day, so I'm just looking up at the screen. Then you say ah, and they hold up this one. Then you add words like pen, pan, okay? And I did this yesterday. If you Google words with short A, you're going to get a whole list of words with short A. If you Google words with short E, you'll get a whole list of words with short E. So that is something, I mean, even spending like 1 minute a couple times a week, just doing that isolated practice is going to make a significant difference in short vowel confusion. Okay, let me go. This is just showing you can start off at the isolated sound or go to words. So the last thing you can do with their spelling words is play games with them. So one thing I like to do is you could put their spelling words on index cards and get a bingo sheet like this and play, like, think tic-tac-toe or connect four with your child. So you pull up a word and you might read it to your child, and they let's say the word is wet, they write it in one of the squares. Then they pull up and read one of their spelling words to you, and you write it in another square with another color. And you keep going back and forth until the first person gets 5 across. What's funny about this game is all they are doing are reading and spelling words. But because it's in a game, my kids used to come in, can we play 5 across today? Are we gonna play 5 across? I'm like, okay, you know, sure, because all they're doing is reading and spelling. All right, so those are some things you can do at the middle school or the elementary level. In high school, some of the signs are limited vocabulary, poor written expression, poor grades, again, poor spelling, laborious reading, difficulty getting thoughts on paper, still problems with directionality, remembering sequences or multi-step directions, and then again, frequent absences. So back to the continuum, we're looking at more morphology, okay? So what is the advantage of teaching those morphemes? Like, for example, micro or tele, like in telecommunication, or, you know, the number roots like quad and quar for 4 and so on. So what they do is they're decoding, when you teach those morphemes, they're able to decode larger chunks of language faster, which makes them more fluent to be able to read those more technical words. And when we teach them for reading and spelling, so they learn to spell more complex words. I think these are backwards. Each morpheme, what a morpheme is the smallest unit of language that carries meaning. So it, like S by itself doesn't mean anything. If I go up to you and I go, you're gonna go, is there something, are you okay? But if I add to the end of dog, it does have a meaning. It means plural or more than one. So it's the smallest unit. Like if dog would be a morpheme. You can't take away any letter and it still means dog. So each of these micro, tele, quad, quar, they all have meanings. And so it's a way to build vocabulary very quickly. Instead of teaching one word, you teach a root. And that increases, that vocabulary helps in turn increase comprehension. So to give you an example, here is, now this isn't 101. We have a page in one of our course manuals that has 101 words that have the root tele in it. And tele means far. So television is far vision. You're viewing something from far away. Telephone, a phon and phone means sound. So a telephone means a far sound. So if a student is reading a passage and doesn't know what telecommunication is, but they know what communication is, and they know tele means far, they can reasonably assume that telecommunication means communication from far away. So teaching morphemes to older students is really, really helpful. I know in other states, they actually, like in Ohio, they require morpheme instruction starting in 3rd grade. In Michigan, we don't really have guidelines for that, at least that I'm aware of. If they are, they're newer, but I really don't think so. So how do you know when to go get help? And like I said, it's not 1 or 2 signs from those lists. It would be a lot of them, frequently, severely. and there are some screeners that you could do for testing before you go off to see like if you want a formal diagnosis of like a dyslexia or something like that. You could give a phonological awareness test or screening. You know, they would have these at the school. Pseudo word decoding, that means those nonsense words or those syllables. They should be able to apply the phonetic patterns to unfamiliar words because they're going to need to do that as they go up in grades. Spelling, you know, tests, and reading fluency, primarily accuracy. If a student is weak in all 4 of these areas, I mean, that's a pretty strong sign that there may be a more severe reading problem. Right now, only a licensed psychologist can diagnose dyslexia in Michigan. But, you know, that would be, again, I would maybe reserve that for a more severe reading difficulty if you're worried about it, because the schools are equipped to teach phonological awareness and do many of these testings. The one advantage of, you know, one of the advantage of testing though outside is it's very thorough. And when I had my daughter tested for ADHD, I also found out what her strengths were. And that was so important to me. It wasn't just here's where you're going wrong. It's she scored really high in certain areas that we could really use that to build her up. But the other reason is if there is a diagnosis of dyslexia, and you go to an accredited, like if you do want help outside of school, like our company, because we are accredited through the International Dyslexia Association, you can't use insurance to pay for it, but if you have a medical spending account, they do consider it a form of therapy. So you can use a medical spending account that is not taxed to pay for like a tutoring. So that would be the advantage of going to like a dyslexia specialist, because, you know, some kids just need help outside of school too. I mean, it's not that the school isn't helping, but some kids just need more. And also not all kids that have dyslexia, I'll be honest with you, qualify for special ed. In our state, and this isn't, I'm not talking about the district, we have one of the low, I don't know if it's still this way, but it was the bottom 9th percentile to get into special ed. Now, fortunately, most districts around us, like Birmingham, they're not going to wait until your child falls way that far low before they're going to give your child help. But legally, that's what, you know, the state has us do. So we have to remember, though, that the school has, you know, there has to be a cutoff at some point where these are the lowest struggling students that we have to address. So even some of our students with dyslexia don't qualify for special ed because their skills are a little too high. So they may still need help. Okay. All right, so the best instruction or the recommendation of science is direct and systematic instruction in phonemic awareness, phonics, decoding and encoding, which is spelling, also non-phonetic word reading, like being able to read irregular words, vocabulary development, and comprehension. And the way to teach them, the best way to teach is using multisensory, kind of hands-on, tactile elements to it, visual, auditory, tactile, kinesthetic. Having a phonics-based program, which, you know, we have here in Birmingham, sequentially teaching in a sequential order in a very structured and systematic way, having a lot of cumulative review and direct instruction. And that means you're directly teaching the skills, not a lot of guesswork involved. So if you do need to go outside for help outside of the school, I would recommend you contact the International Dyslexia Association. They have, they can refer you. You can go in, find by state who is certified in your area, which usually practitioners. You may be able to find out which centers are accredited. I know we are. I want to say Michigan Dyslexia Institute is, and Children's Dyslexia Center. There's one in, I used to be on their board. Hold on, they're in Dearborn. Okay, so I know that there's 3 in the area that are accredited, and you may find individual practitioners that are certified that are not necessarily tied to an organization. So that's where I would start. So that is, I know, probably more information than I was supposed to share with you, but that is my information. So I hope it was helpful. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Stephanie. That was a lot of information and it was really, really helpful. I wanted to say that I just found it so astonishing that you said the average student can see a word 3 to 5 times and it goes to the permanent storage, but someone with a learning disability might have to see it 50 to 100 times because that explains so much right
It
now for
does,
me
doesn't it?
when I'm thinking about my son and I'm like, you had this word the last 3 days and then he doesn't quite have it the next day and you're like, what happened? But eventually it does come. So that's just like, as a parent, thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
And then I just wanted to ask you a question about I know you were giving some lists of things that might go towards dyslexia or other learning disabilities for reading. If you have a student that is above average in reading and speaking, but has like a very big struggle with spelling and handwriting, does that fall under any category for help? I mean, as
It
far as like
could.
reading
I don't know if it
intervention.
qualifies for help in the school, but
No,
like,
not in the
if
school, but I mean, does it like, it doesn't point towards dyslexia, I don't
well,
think,
we
but
would, you know, again, I can't diagnose. I mean, if they have really poor spelling, that is a sign of potentially phonological weakness, which could result in, you know, we do have some I had a student not too long ago that was a 5th grader that was reading at grade level. And both of his parents were teachers and he was struggling with writing skills. So they brought him in for writing skills. But when I looked at his evaluation, he scored in the bottom 5% in reading pseudo words. Okay, so he was reading at grade level. No one was alerted to that. And I said to them, I said, yes, we can help you with your writing skills, but this is a big concern to me because it means that he does not have a strategy to decode unfamiliar words. And as he goes on to middle school, he's going to need that strategy. And so it hadn't affected him yet, but it would have been a disaster had that not been addressed. And both parents were like, yes, help us with that. And we did. And so, yeah, you may not always see all the signs. They may not always be there. It is odd if the student is reading above level, but the spelling, that would be a concern. And I'm not saying dyslexia, but what I recommend, you know, to parents is don't wait to get help. You know, if you can get extra help, because when you first start off, the gap might only be this big. If you wait, the gap may be this big. So, you know, I really don't ever recommend saying, oh, just wait, they'll grow into it. No, nip it in the bud because it'll be a lot less money. It'll be a lot less time. It'll be a lot less everything if you nip it in the bud.
thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? I don't have the chat. Well, I actually.
It's okay. There's nothing in the chat. I'm watching it right now.
Okay.
See if anyone wants to unmute. We are getting word kind of towards the end of this presentation that one of the Zoom links might have been not working. So we will make sure that everyone who's looking for this, it will get the recording. So it's one benefit of the virtual format. We haven't had that happen yet this year, so I'm not sure what link it was, but we will figure that out.
One thing I would be happy to do if you would like it is I can turn the slides of the presentation into a document and send it to Carrie. And then you can have that. I tweak my presentations until the very last minute. Like I didn't like the thank you sign at the end of my original one and I changed it 5 minutes before. So, I will be happy to do that. Then you can have some of that information.
Thank you. That would be wonderful.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, I don't see any questions. And, but that was wonderful information. Thank you so much, Stephanie. We will make sure to get this to everyone that was looking for it tonight that we're starting to see come in, and we'll figure out that Zoom link situation. But if you could get that to Carrie, we'll get that out to everyone as well.
No
And
problem.
we just want to thank the Birmingham staff that we have on the call too. That was going to be available in case there were any specific Birmingham questions. But we appreciate all of you guys being here, especially during our Teachers Week this week.
Yeah, happy Teacher Appreciation Week.
All right. Well, I think we will end the call. And if anyone has any great ideas for presentations for next year, please get a hold of Carrie or myself. Have a great rest of your Thursday night, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.